Thank you very much for those warm words, but this evening is not about me. It's an evening where I really welcome that so many of you are gathered to honour leadership and to honour a particular quality of leadership which the world needs more of. A quality of leadership that women can bring as half the human race, and we are increasingly doing it. We're doing it in so many areas, in the business world, in academia, in local community beyond belief, but also increasingly in holding high office, in heading UN agencies, in being part of what the world very badly needs, which is the other way of looking, the perspective, the empathy, the enabling way in which women often lead. It's a different way of bringing together talents, maybe listening a little bit more, because traditionally women have had to listen because they hadn't as much voice, and so we learned to do it. I do recall with great sense of how much it mattered at the time and how honoured I was being honoured by the Foreign Policy Association in 1995, a long, long time ago now, and I never thought that I would have such a genuine, huge privilege of standing here, if you like, as a graduate of a dinner like this and honour a woman whom I singularly admire. Before I get to why I singularly admire her, can I say that she has recently joined a club that I have the current honour to chair, the Council of Women World Leaders. And just to give you a flavour of our new recent membership, it spans different parts of the globe and different aspects of women's leadership. The first elected African president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, became a member. The person who holds the G8 and EU presidency during 2007, Angela Merkel, is a member. And Michelle Bachelet is a member. So let us not think in terms of the one or the few. In fact, I'd love to have a kind of guessing game with you, but it's not appropriate to this evening, about how many members there are, active members, in the Council of Women World Leaders. Well, let's try it for a little minute. I just want to be kind of provocative this evening. I'll ask this table here, how many do you think there are in the Council of Women World Leaders? Take a wild guess. That means women who have either been elected President or Prime Minister in the past, like myself, has-beens, or currently are President or Prime Minister. 12. Over here?
47, and that's Hillary.
Okay, well now we're over the top. I'll stop immediately. And I'll say honourably and with great actively 34. Because there are women who didn't want to join a club of women. I won't mention one very distinguished woman Prime Minister from a neighbouring island of Ireland. I wouldn't dream of mentioning her, but who didn't feel that she wanted to join this club of women. But we are 34 members of the Council of Women World Leaders. And we are very active. We are bringing together, with the help of the Ministerial Assembly of Women, which currently Madeleine Albright also chairs, and I was with Madeleine earlier this evening at another function, and she's extraordinarily active on women's issues. And we're bringing together networks of women ministers. We're bringing together younger women, mentoring across divides. The Council of Women World Leaders is joining with the White House project that is represented here this evening, and the Annenberg Foundation and my day job, Realising Rights, in a Women Leaders Intercultural Forum, spanning an intercultural link of women that President Bachelet is well aware of. But let's come to our honoree of this evening. It is, to me, something really very touching and moving that I can so identify with the way in which President Bachelet stood as a woman who had an experience that so many women have, an experience of motherhood, and for her, very much motherhood fending on her own at a particular time. An experience of professional life, an extraordinary professional life, surgeon, paediatrician, epidemiologist, and studies in military strategy. She not only served as Minister of Health, she served as Minister of Defence in her country, an extraordinary combination under President Ricardo Lagos, whom I work with very closely in the Club of Madrid, and we've become very strong friends. And everything that I've heard, and we've heard about the struggles of the past, lead me to understand in some small measure how much there must have been an inner compass, an inner strength, an inner determination that this woman has become the first elected woman president of her country with so much to offer, with so many languages that she speaks, that she is fluent in Spanish, English, German, Portuguese and French, that she has been able to put together in her cabinet a cabinet that is very diverse and that includes a significant number of women because she so decided, that has come here, and this is my last point, has come here to New York with a very bipartisan group from Chile. Bipartisan because she knows that she is the leader of her whole population, of her whole country. I honour you. Please come up and address the population.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Mary Robinson, because of your wonderful remarks. And thanks for the Friends of National Endowment for Democracy and Foreign Affairs Policy Association in this New York Democracy Forum dinner for having the possibility to share with you some thoughts of how we're looking the country, the region, and particularly because you are no strangers to Chile. You are familiar with these legendary Republican institutions that were forged in my country during the 19th century and which in the mid-20th century gave birth to one of the most vibrant and long-lived democracies. And you also know what happened in 1973, and you also know how in 1990 we restored democracy, and with it the respect for people's rights. And here, allow me to mention our debt of gratitude to all the friends overseas who supported our struggle to recover freedom. Thank you very much. "17 years have passed since then, and there are some obvious questions. Has Chile consolidated its reestablished democracy? Are there any lessons to be learned from the process through which we have lived? And what are our challenges right now?" And I want to ask you to accompany me in the following exercise. Let's move back 20 years. The opposition to the dictatorship has just opted for a peaceful transition to democracy rather than a violent approach. It aims our ambition. In 16 years' time, Chile will be a fully democratic country free of all risk of a return to authoritarian rule. People's civil rights will be totally respected. The progress achieved towards truth and justice in cases of human rights violation will have few parallels among other transitions around the world. The remaining anti-democratic provisions of the Constitution will have been repealed. The economy will have grown at an average annual rate of more than 5.5%. The poverty rate will have dropped from almost 40 to 13.7%. Enormous progress will have been achieved in housing, health care, and education. Road, port, and airport infrastructure will have been almost completely renewed. A woman will have been elected as President of the Republic. In 1988, would you have dreamed, or have nightmare, whatever you want to consider it, for a moment of such an outcome? Probably not. Yet that is precisely what has happened. In other words, Chile's transition to democracy, it's a success story. This reflects the will of an entire country to reach agreement on returning to the path of progress, democracy, and social justice that had characterized us for decades. It remains the will of Chilean politicians, and that is also one of the reasons why I came here with a bipartisan delegation, because I think that you build every day the relationship, the friendship, as we call it, civic friendship with all the parties and all the political perspective. And I think that Chile's transition reflects the will of Chilean politicians to put past antagonism behind them and to adopt a new attitude to the challenges of the future. Well, it's not that paradise, but almost, I would say. During the dictatorship, Chile was, in the words of Georgetown University political scientist Arturo Valenzuela, a nation of enemies. Today, it is a society that grows more united day by day. And I really am proud of what we have achieved, and we have all achieved it. I am proud to have contributed to the reconciliation of Chileans and to a better future to our children. During my election campaign, I said that Chile somos todos. It's difficult to explain this because it means so many different perspectives. In English, we could say something like Chile is each and every Chilean, but we're talking about how we face inequalities in the older perspective. This income distribution, gender issues, territorial issues, age issues, and so on. And the idea that a country is built by all its citizens, that was how Chile achieved great things in the past, and that is how we want to build a better country today. I think that the main lesson of Chile's political process is the importance of reaching agreements, of engaging in dialogue, and growing in understanding. But today, Chile's democracy faces new challenges. Because of what we have achieved, we can now set ourselves even more ambitious goals. That's progress, that's development. And we can, of course, address not only those areas in which we remain weak, but also the new concerns and realities that have emerged in the world of globalization. And that's why we came today to the special meeting on climate change. Because even though some people could think it's a little bit sophisticated, it's not sophisticated. It's a problem of all of us, and we have to be here. These new challenges can be divided into two categories. Those that have to do with revitalizing our democracy, and those have to do with guaranteeing our citizens' social rights. This is very important because when we think about how we can really consolidate democracy, I remember a conversation I had last year with Madeleine Albright, because we were speaking, but I didn't find the right words in English to say it. And the words is, what I tried to explain is, democracy has to deliver. And that's very important. Well, but let me do an analogy. If we have already succeeded succeeded in consolidating a government of the people, because our citizens freely elect the rulers, then today the challenge lies in other two propositions. In government by the people, in other words, a more vital, better quality democracy with greater citizens' participation, and for the people. And that is a democracy that delivers and ensures more and better public goods for all citizens. Let us consider the first of these challenges. The starting point for addressing this challenge is one on which we all agree. The only way to strengthen democracy with more democracy. The fact that I'm here with all the presidents of the coalition and opposition parties is a demonstration as until, despite day-to-day rankling, political interest takes second place and the country's interest is in the first place. However, we still have important pending challenges as regards to representative democracy. One of these is to reform our electoral system, the so-called binominal system. Briefly, each electoral district returns 2 members to each House of Congress, and that means that in approximately 90% of the cases, they elect 1 candidate from each coalition, 1 from the Concertación and 1 from the opposition. The thing is that this severely undermines competition between the 2 coalitions, while at the same time other parties, which in some districts may take more than 15 or even 20% of the votes, obtain no seats. My government has presented a bill to partially reform the system, which we hope will be approved by Congress. But we also have to address another problem, the problem of electoral apathy. More than 2.5 million Chileans, mostly very young people, are not exercising the right to vote because they simply do not register to do so. I mean, in our country there is a special system where you can freely go and register to vote. If you register to vote, you have to vote. If you don't, you don't have. So the thing is, if you ask me what I would prefer, to have automatic registration, and that everybody chooses if they want to vote or not, and that's the candidate's idea, to have attractive solutions so the people will go to vote. But there's no agreement in our country about that. So that's why we have promoted a reform that is not the best, in my opinion, but at least it's better than what we have, that will mean automatic registration at the age of 18, but we're also, that's the age for voting in our country, but we're also proposing that a person can voluntarily deregister and thereby be exempt from the obligation to vote. I think voting is a right. It shouldn't be an obligation. It's a right. But not everybody believes in that. So that's why we're trying to find the best solution that could make everybody comfortable with it. A few years ago, a law was introduced that provides state-funded campaign financing and place a cap on spending. Today, my government is proposing changes to make this mechanism more transparent and to introduce stiffer penalties for those who infringe its terms. But that is not all. We're also striving to create a democracy which is more participatory, that includes more and more citizens in the process of designing public policies, and that incorporates sectors which have been traditionally excluded. I'm talking about stakeholders, to include in the political definitions stakeholders' opinions, and then we make the decisions, but to make richer public policies, because stakeholders, I think they have a voice and they have proposals and suggestions. One proposal in this direction is the People's Bill that I presented to Congress in July. This would empower citizens to present legislative initiative in all areas except those such as fiscal spending and taxation and matters relating to international relations that are the exclusive prerogative of the President of the Republic, according to Chilean law. Also, my government is decisively promoting measures of affirmative actions to ensure gender parity and guarantee a minimum number of women in Congress. To this end, I plan to present a bill providing the necessary incentive for political parties to include more women in their list of candidates, and I should add, and in places that it can win, because otherwise you have lots of women in places that will never win. So we need an important thing in this. Another important issue concerns the constitutional recognition of indigenous people and the right to preserve and develop their own culture in an environment of respect. And my government is promoting the ratification of the International Labour Organization Convention 169 on indigenous and tribal people, and the United Nations. Chile also supported the approval of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. But if I say that we have one challenge, the second great challenge of Chile's democracy today, that of government for the people, is in my view one also shared by many other Latin American democracies. Today, citizens not only expect democratic behavior from their leaders, they also expect democracy to deliver on day-to-day needs, thus giving real meaning to the concept of a citizen's right to have rights, as proposed by the well-known German-Chilean sociologist Norbert Lechner. Income inequality is still high in Chile. The richest 10% of the population receives almost 40% of national income, and the richest 20% receives around 14 times the share of the poorest 20%, although the gap is reduced by half when focalized social benefits and policies are taken into account. But, as in any democracy, new problems and new concerns appear. These include the ease with which people can slip back into poverty as well as rise out of it, and the continuing existence of different types of discrimination, such as those based on age, ethnic origin, or gender. And then there is a great vulnerability of those who live just above the poverty line. Moreover, the existing individual and contributive solutions to the provision of social security have proved inadequate to the task of ensuring protection for all Chileans. As a result, we must urgently address what Pierre Rosenbaum terms the new social question. To that end, it is indispensable that we create a system that can integrate existing social policies and allow them to be sufficiently dynamic to adapt to the important changes and increasing security of modern society. Our answer in Chile has a name. We had decided that we have the challenge of creating a modern law-based social and democratic state is the creation of a system of social protection. Some people talk about social cohesion, but we're talking about social protection. And I don't want to go into details about each of these measures that my government is implementing. I simply want to draw attention to our guiding principle in this field, which is that Chile's democracy must ensure the social rights of all our people. This is what we are seeking to achieve, for example, through a reform of the pension system. This initiative is one of the most important social reforms that our country has undertaken in recent decades. Under the present system, workers hold individual saving accounts administered by private companies into which they must pay contribution over their working life. On reaching retirement age, they can draw on these savings and their earnings. However, the system has been found to have important failings, which we are now seeking to correct. These include discrimination against women, because we live longer, so we always have smaller pensions than men, a lack of competition among administration companies, and the fact that the self-employed do not in general belong to the system. So at the end, we have a lot of people who or don't have pensions and have so low pensions that they cannot live with dignity. As well as reforming the industry and promoting greater competition, our government also wants the state to play a far more essential role and to ensure a basic pension for the lowest income 60% of Chileans, irrespective of whether they have contributed or not. We believe that it is ethically imperative to provide greater protection for the senior citizens who many today lack of protection. A month ago, the lower house of Congress approved this reform and is currently before the Senate. And I would like to make a comment on this. Probably I was hearing Mayor Robinson And I love to hear her because every time I speak of the way women do things, men put a terrible face and it looks like, sort of a feminist sort of thing. But the thing is that I believe I've been in politics since I was 18 years old. I won't say how many years ago, but and I have learned that being able to have public policies that can be sustainable, it will be better if you, as I already said, take in consideration stakeholders, and if you can, as a government, produce consensus, or at least you can know exactly what sort of divergence you have and consensus you have. So, for example, this reform of pension system reform, instead of just sending a project that I would like to Parliament, I organize a national council with groups of different perspectives, pension people, trade unions, entrepreneurs, and so on, and also specialists in the area. So we receive a wonderful, I would say, document with alternatives. And as a government, we decide we go this way. And some people say to us, from the opposition naturally, they say, we want decisions, not commissions. But the thing is that in our history, we have laws that have been 10 years in Congress. And after this commission and not decision, in 1 year, less than a year, we already have approved it in the House of Representatives. Now it's in the Senate, and I hope we'll have it approved at the end of this year, or first semester next year. And the 1st of July 2008, I will be able to pay for our older people better pensions. So I believe that this strategy is not a bad strategy at all. Because I think the thing that the government has to do is to build consensus, to know, there are some things that you're going to go, even though you die, It's so symbolic and so important. You will do it anyway, even though it won't work. But most of the things, we want to do things that work. So that's why I think you have to find the ways how things can work. And that's my way, and I think some people don't understand it, but I think it's handled pretty well. Don't get bored, I'm just finishing. Well, I was talking to you that we're maintaining the economical model, but we are changing it in some way because we believe that market, it's not the only way to act in a society, and that you have to have a citizen society where market plays a role, but where the state can make sure that people get what they need. And our rights-based approach is also the inspiration for other social reforms. In healthcare, for example, we are implementing the highly complex plan to ensure that Chileans, whether covered by the National Health Service or private medical insurance, will receive timely and efficient attention for a number of illness. Of course, everybody will receive attention for everything, but there are some illness that, because of the acute, how acute they are, or how grave ¿cómo se dice? Grave they are, or how costly they are, you have to make people sure to get the health support they need. So the idea of this plan gives them a guaranteed right to care in the event of suffering these illnesses. Similarly, Chile already has a system of unemployment insurance that provides benefits to those workers who lose their job. But today we aim to increase those benefits and to extend the system's coverage to more workers. This proposed reform is a further example of the priority we are giving to the rights-based approach. In summary, we believe that democracies must improve the delivery of public good to their citizens, that the guaranteed minimum level of social protection must be defined democratically, and the public policies must then be implemented accordingly. Unless we can achieve this, the legitimacy of democracy will be undermined in the eyes of our citizens. And we have seen some researches. When people in Latin America have been asked in the past, I don't know if the question was correctly done, because sometimes, you can produce some direction in the answer. first, they ask, what do you prefer? Do you prefer an authoritarian regime that works economically for you, or you prefer a democrat regime that doesn't work economically for you? Well, of course, most prefer an authoritarian regime that economically works for them. Of course, everybody would prefer a democracy who could economically works for the person. But what I mean is that democracy really must deliver, have to deliver, because that's the way you consolidate democracy, you legitimate democracy, and that's the way people really believe that democracy is not perfect, but it's the best system. And I think that's why, and that's one of the things that our democracies in Latin America have been lacking of, and that's, I would say, the output of democracy, that side that we have to do much more than that. Well, friends, the story of Chile's transition to democracy, we believe, is one of success. That doesn't mean that everything's okay. We have terrible challenges and problems, but if 16 years ago we have proposed as our goal what we have, in fact, achieved, we would probably have been accused of dreaming. But it's not a reason for resting on our laurels. Today we face new challenges. Our democracy is being called on to deliver greater levels of economical and social satisfaction. This is reshaping the role of the state, which has not only a duty to promote a competitive economy, but also an ethical responsibility to build a more inclusive and equitable society. Clearly, the quality of Chilean democracy has improved, bringing with it new levels of participation and economic and social well-being for its citizens. Also, more demanding people, because that's part of democracy. Our democratic I'll always say, and when I was minister, and I have to put everybody to try to get into a consensus on what about the health reform we're going to develop. And I thought it was so difficult sometimes. I thought, wow, it should have been very easy to govern with a dictatorship. You don't have to put any people, in common with other ones. You just say, this is what I'm going to say. But anyway, I'm democratic. Well, our democratic experience is, as any democratic experience, as every democratic experience, is unique. It's unique in that it's the reflection of a political process shaped by a particular set of circumstances. However, the one lesson we can share is that democracy, as a process, needs to be nurtured day by day, at all levels. And this is our goal today in Chile. And I'm certain also the aspiration of all our citizens for the future that await us, and certainly the aspiration of all of us who are tonight at this dinner. So thank you very much, and I will be receiving your questions.
Stay here.
Okay.
Stay here.
Too long, sorry, but I wanted to say something.
Yes. Madam President, I think that was a remarkable address. This is a very sophisticated audience of the Foreign Policy Association and the other groups who are here, who've heard many speeches by heads of state. Normally they're safe, set piece, very positive, just give the message that people will listen to. What you did this evening, I think, was to give us your thinking, your thought processes, how you are coping with the challenge and the enormous responsibility of being a good head of state, of being a bipartisanly good head of state, of trying to understand where your country is and be for it above all else. I'm told that there may be just a moment or two when one or two people may want to ask questions. It's quite late, so people may or may not. Does anybody have a burning question for the President?
We have a few written questions.
Oh, a few written questions. And do I give her the medal first or later?
Let's go ahead and give the medal.
I think I should go ahead and give the medal. I'm dying to give her the medal. Madam President, it is with great pleasure and in a sense of humility that I put this medal on you.
Thank you very much.
The hour is late, so we are going to keep it brief. The first question is, Chile's economy is the strongest in Latin America. Is the increasing threat of inflation and the recent union demonstrations cause for concern?
Well, I would say that inflation in Chile today is more related to external factors. It's due to mainly, increased food prices. All the corn and trigo, ¿cómo se dice? Wheat and milk and those sort of things. So it's not an internal factor, it's more, and of course, fuel. And so we believe that, we hope that, and also because we had, as you had a terrible hot summer, we had an incredible cold winter, and we lost most of our agricultural production of the winter. So inflation, we believe that it can be controlled. It's just a matter of time. And of course, I hope the food prices will go down in the world because our people need to be fed. But anyway, we'll be looking very carefully to this issue, and if we need to do more about it, we'll do it. Still, it's not that high, but it's higher than we would like to. And the second thing is that union demonstration, well, the thing is that I think during a long time we have had in our country workers that were like second-class workers. And these workers are subcontractors. But the thing is that there was in many, not everywhere, but in many places, their labor conditions were not the best. So that's why President Lagos passed a bill, in order to regulate better the labor condition of these people. And even though during my government, we approved this law, of course not everybody has followed the law, have done whatever they have to do. And I think that one of the things is that union demonstrations sometimes what are showing us is that not everybody is, I would say, going in the right direction. And I will explain one of them. It's very difficult when you have an industry in any area that you have workers that do this inside the company and workers outside the company. They make the same job, but one of them receive half or third of the salary of the other one. It's very difficult. So those are the sort of things that has to be solved by a lot of industry, and not only private sector, also state public sector industry, that they have to organize their human resources in order to fulfill what the law says about this. And there were some in the case of copper mine. That was the public sector industry, and they hadn't done what they should do. So, some of them is because people are not doing what they have to do. On the other hand, there was another trade unions demonstration in a private sector company, and we knew about this because that company was doing anti-trade unionist work. And they will have done a lot of things. And we told them, you will have problems. You have to solve this problem. Otherwise, you're going to have, a problem there. And they didn't do what they have to do. And what happens, it is a private issue until there's strike. And then they ask the government to solve the problem. So I think we all have to do what we have to do. The government has to do what they have to do, but the private sector also. And we're working a lot on social responsibility for the business people, because we believe that everybody has to do their job. It's not only a public sector job, it's also a public-private sector job. And that's why we have, and the third thing that's important, I was telling you that in democracy people are more aware of their rights, are more aware that they can demonstrate. We're not in a military regimes where strikes were forbidden. But on the other hand, Chile has been very successful in the economy. Copper prices have been very high. So people say, come on, why my salary is not much bigger? Why I'm not being much richer, even though the salary has been improving a lot, but not enough So the thing is, I asked myself, how can we deal with this issue? Because we need to, on one hand, continue growing economically. I mean, a country like ours has to grow. I have no doubt about it. How can we continue being competitive? But on the other hand, how can we have workers with good labor conditions and with better salaries? And what's the deal here? The thing is that this is not an issue that the government can solve by itself. Because mostly of the employments are not from the public sector, are from the private sector. So I think in Chile, and that's how we are looking at it, is that we have to make like a social agreement, a social pact, to see how we can find the best way. And we're talking about subsidies, a different instrument. I'm not going to go into details right now. How can we deal with a country that must be competitive? Because we have been doing things well in economy, but if you don't do new things, you will be back. You will go going back. I mean, we need to continue advancing. How we can maintain competitiveness, but on the other hand, we have dignified, decent conditions of labor. And that's one of the issues that we are addressing right now, and we're working on it. Because if a country improves its economical and social conditions, everybody wants to improve. It's not possible that the country and economy goes well, and people look at the television, but the prosperity goes in the street and not comes into the houses of the people. So that's why it's a big challenge, but we're working on it. So I cannot assure you there will be no more demonstrations during my government. Probably there will be. But during Ricardo Lagos, there were thousands of demonstrations. There were people months outside the Moneda. I was minister, Soledad Alvear, she's the president of the Christian Democratic Party. We were minister, we saw that. But everybody has forgotten. And everything seems to happen in my government. But that's another issue. I don't care about it. I mean, but I'm telling you that that's part of democracy. That is not necessarily instability. And we're working on that. But, on the other hand, if we don't address the issue that if economy goes well, people feel they have the right to live better, I mean, we're not understanding what democracy is for. And so I think that all of us have to make more efforts in order that prosperity is in everyone's house and not only in a few ones. Thank you.
These two questions are interrelated, and at some level they may be, and we'll leave it at that. Can Chile's economic model be replicated throughout Latin America as an alternative to Chavismo? And what measures would you like to see the next U.S. administration adopt to improve American policy towards Latin America?
Well, the thing is that usually when you read from Miami Herald, New York Times, Washington Post, The Economist, Financial Times, or whatever, you find this like the division between the good guys and the bad guys in Latin America. Is Latin America going red? Was the title of an article. I think that, and I said in the Columbia University when I was, just before I came here, I think that Latin America is going more like the rainbow, because we have different countries with different political histories, with different traditions, with different constitution, with different institutionality. And, for example, what is good for Chile not necessarily is good for Brazil. And I explained there, when you think of Brazil, and I'm talking Brazil because Brazil and Chile, we have a lot of similarities, we think a lot, we have a lot of common perspective, and we're doing many similar things in the economic point of view inside the countries. But Brazil has an enormous internal demand, and his GDP, it's more related to internal demand, not to external demand. So Brazil doesn't need FTAs, so he can choose what FTAs he wants to implement and what he doesn't want to implement. On the other hand, Chile, whose GDP is like 60 or 70% related to external trade. Well, we have been very active in developing FTAs with a lot of regions abroad because we need it for our development. And then we have signed 56 FTAs. We are the kings and queens of the FTAs. And, but that doesn't mean that we can sell our receipt, you know. But trying to explain this to you that say every country is different. Chile is a country who has some capabilities, other countries have others. Having said so, I think that Chile, and we have been doing this every time we go to every meeting in Latin America or wherever we go, we explain how Chile has developed, how it has worked, how we're not talking of rhetorical speeches. We're talking of a country that in 1985 had a poverty of 49%, that in 1990 his poverty was 38.6%, and in 2006 it's 13.7%. I mean, it worked, it really worked. We're talking about a country that from each 10 students of higher education, I mean tertiary education, college or universities, 7 of them are the first in their families to go into higher education. So we're talking on a country who is giving more equity for the person. I mean, just to say some of the issues. And we try to explain why this model that Chile has developed, development model, it's a good way. So is Chilean's economic model a possibility to be replicated in other countries? Yes, it is. Are we been doing our job? We have. But the only problem with this is that, as Fernando Enrique Cardoso said once, that Chile has a conceptual leadership because we are not a big economical potence. We don't have petrol. We don't have much money. We are a small country, only 60 million. But we do have, I would say, we are very clear what we think we have to do, and we're willing to share with all our friends. And we're doing things. For example, with Central America, we have developed a fund, and we have joined with the Inter-American Development Bank, and we said, we put one part, you put 2 parts. And they accepted, and we have given this fund for Central America in order that they develop their own institutionality like Fundación Chile in Chile, where we are taking care of how we incorporate innovation in the economical processes. And with Caribbean countries, we also put some money with OAS, and we are developing projects for the development of Caribbean. So Chile is doing this job, and will continue working, but of course, because we are really convinced that it works. And I think we are willing to share our experience, but of course, the other people want to share our experience with them. Because in some time, these are the sort of things I shouldn't say, but everybody thought that Chile was the best student, but the worst classmate, you know, because they felt that we were arrogant, that we were doing things well, and we felt superior in some sort of thing. That's not true. But it's necessary that we do our job so people understand that we want to share with them our experience, and every country will use the experience according to their own characteristic. What we have worked in the region is that we have to integrate to solve many common problems, but respecting diversity. And we are willing to do much more in this area. Thank you. And and what would I like to see in the next U.S. administration to improve the policies towards Latin America? Well, last year you asked me something like that, and I don't know what I answered. But then I thought that what I should have told you, first of all, look at us as adults. We are adults, we're not children. Believe that we are capable of doing things, first of all things. And second, I would say, look at Latin America as a possibility. Because even though, and don't look at it with prejudices. America is a rainbow and has lots of possibilities. And third, try to think on specific policies that can help countries that have having hard times, cooperating, but in those areas that countries need. Hear the voices of the countries. And I think that people will be very grateful to feel that they have a good ally in the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Madam President,